single one of us to get out there and vote. You all ready to win this? So I've got this friend that I met, like many of you that I have met over the course of this campaign. More than 20 months on the road, going to every single one of the 254 counties of Texas, listening to everyone, because we want to represent and serve everyone. Never asking, no me importa, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. All I care is that you're a Texan, you're an American, you're a human being, and you want this country to be able to do better. That's enough, and then we can work together to make it so. And there are some here with us today, and I'm going to tell you one of their stories, but parents of children who have medically complex conditions, medically expensive conditions, in a state that's the least insured in the United States of America. In a country where protections for those pre-existing conditions have come under attack unlike any time before, where you have a junior senator who has promised as mission number one to repeal each and every single word of the Affordable Care Act, including those protections for those who have a condition that may not be easy or cheap to treat, but without that treatment will not be able to live. From cancers, to diabetes, to epilepsy, to asthma, to pregnancy, which is considered a pre-existing condition by the insurance companies. We want to make sure that every single one of us is well enough to live to our full potential. But those parents of those medically complex kids have opened up my eyes to something that Amy and I, in our lifetime, have not experienced. The anxiety of knowing that if you're not able to get this right, negotiate the course through the insurance company's red tape, make sure that you understand the Medicaid and Medicaid waiver process, that child whom you love more than anything in the world, anything that you could possibly love in the world, that their very life may be at risk. So this friend that we have met along the way, Julie Ross, who has a child with intellectual disabilities, made a movie about those in this state who live with disabilities, who do not have a voice in their government, don't have a political action committee that makes donations to members of Congress to purchase access and outcomes in elections and the legislation that would be helpful to them, but are just as deserving, just as important of our representation and for being fought for as anyone else. And this message that she sent me today, through a mutual friend, is that either every one of us counts or no one counts. And that's really stuck with me. And it's been really in my mind about everyone who counts and how many of us have been counted out. Those living with disabilities who've been consigned to a life in state-supported living centers, away from their families, unable to live independently, not able to find the fulfillment and purpose and dignity in their lives that they deserve as human beings, in this, the wealthiest, the most powerful country that the world has ever known. A country whose taxpayers, that's all of us, came up with the innovations, the research into the cures and the medications that are so often sold back to us, the most expensive prices on the planet. How can we allow some not to count, some not to be able to live to their full potential, contribute to their maximum capacity in their lifetimes? How can we ask some parents to think about putting their children in an institution because it's the easiest path and they're sick and tired of fighting the red tape, the insurance companies, the bureaucracy, instead of allowing that child to live at home with their parents, making sure that they get a world-class public school education because we've invested in those public schools and public school districts and public school teachers? How can we make sure that their lives count for every bit as much as anyone else's? How can we A state that ranks 50th, dead last in voter turnout. Not because we love our democracy any less than anyone else, but by design, on purpose, and not an accident. The courts, 4 times last year, they found that Texas, through our leaders in Austin, drew some people out of their congressional districts, out of a reason to vote, out of their democracy, diminished the power of their ballot, ensured that their voice is not heard, counted out of what is purported to be the world's greatest democracy. Voter ID laws that ensure that some will not be able to cast that ballot, where you can use your ID or license to carry a firearm to prove who you are, but you cannot use your ID from Texas Southern University to prove who you are. It's very clear. There are some who are intending to vote and some others who are not. How can we, in this, the least of insured states in the country, with more than 4 million of our fellow Texans unable to see a doctor, unable to take our child to a therapist, unable to afford the medications that keep us alive? How can we allow people to die of diabetes, of the flu? How can we allow them to live under the anxiety and pressure of not knowing how much longer they can make it? How can we, in this community, be the largest provider of mental health care services, but not in clinics, not in hospitals, but in the Harris County Jail? More inpatient mental health care beds here in the jail that you pay for than in all the public mental health care facilities combined. Unconscionable, immoral, and the most fiscally irresponsible thing that we can do. Because I'll tell you this, when someone's suffering schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, untreated, can't get the help that they need, and gets arrested on purpose because it's the one place they can go where by law we will feed them, we will house them, we will clothe them, we will prescribe them the psychotropic medications that keep them alive. Not only are they not free to live that life on the outside, to go to school and finish their education, to raise their family, to work that job, to pay their taxes and shoulder their fair share of the burden, we, the taxpayers of this community, are paying to keep them locked up. $400 a night, every single night that they're there. And once they're there again, you can bet they will continue to be there off and on for the rest of their lives. $14.50 to be able to provide them outpatient mental health care services on the outside, to free them to also live to their full potential, do everything that they and God intended for themselves in their lives. We can make sure that they are that we count them back in. Make sure that they are well enough, not just because it will be good for them, which it will be. It's going to be great for all of us. Everything that they do over the course of their life, that they're now well enough to do, we will be the beneficiaries of that. How can we, in a state of immigrants, and here we sit in the most diverse city in the United States of America today. How can we bear witness to children taken from their parents, children taken from parents who traveled hundreds, thousands of miles to bring those kids to safety, fleeing some of the most violent places on the planet today, doing what any human being would do if it were the only way to save their child, to bring them to safety. And to find that just as they get here, to the front door of the United States of America, the Texas-Mexico border, instead of that salvation or that safety that they sought for that child for whom they risked their life, their worst nightmare, that kid taken from them by force, if necessary, in some instances, babies torn from the breast of their mother, kept months apart from one another, visiting unspeakable trauma and cruelty on those kids. Today, as we enjoy our freedom, there are still hundreds of children who do not know when or even if they will see their parents. Hundreds of parents already deported back to the very countries from which they fled, knowing not where those children are, in a foster care home in Houston, in Michigan, in Alabama, in a tent city in Tornillo, just outside of El Paso in the Chihuahuan Desert. Though that were the decision of just one man, Donald J. Trump, and his zero-tolerance policy, in a democracy, every single day that these conditions persist, it's on every single one of us. And though those kids initially were counted out, and their parents were counted out, we, the defining immigrant story and experience, can count them back in. We can make sure that every single child is reunited with every single one of those parents that will never stop. We can use our knowledge of what dreamers contribute to the success of our communities, those dreamers in the classroom, those dreamers who are teaching in the classroom, those dreamers served by those who put their lives on the line for this country half a world away, those dreamers who are serving right now for this country half a world away. We can free them permanently from the fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens. Right now, at this moment, we take us leading the way. We can count those dreamers back in. And those school teachers that I was just talking about, those educators, those therapists, those librarians, those vice principals and principals, those bus drivers, those custodians, those who feed the children that are educated in those schools, ask yourself this: are we really able to count them in when by law in Texas they are unable to organize, to use the value of what they provide for our communities and our country to exact better working conditions and wages, in a state where nearly half of them work a second or third job just to make ends meet, where we ask them to teach to a high stakes, high pressure, standardized test, instead of teaching directly to that child and unblocking her lifelong love of learning. If those teachers are unable to organize as effectively as they should be, we must organize for them. Demand that they are paid a living wage so that they only work one job. Allow them to teach directly to the child, and when they retire, in a state that has not seen a cost of living adjustment for retired teachers in 13 years. A state where we doubled the cost of health care for retired teachers just last year. A state and a country where if that retired teacher also worked quarters in the private sector, waited tables, worked as an accountant, started a small business, paid into Social Security every working day of his or her life, thanks to the windfall elimination provision, they will not be able to receive every earned penny that they paid into. Either retired teachers at one time in this state were getting filthy rich, or we've got our priorities upside down. We need to reward those retired teachers, allow them to live a dignity because we respect them. In a country seemingly constantly at war, a country distinguished by that service and sacrifice, women and men willing to go off half a world away, bear the battle, serve this country, put their life on the line, perhaps sacrifice that life, knowing full well that if they survive, they will come back different, changed perhaps forever. In this country, we lose 20 veterans a day, and that's the conservative estimate by the VA. Every single day, by their own hand. The majority of those veterans whose lives we lose were unable or unwilling to go to a VA, see that provider, that psychiatrist or psychologist who can treat their post-traumatic stress disorder, that specialist who can take care of their traumatic brain injury, that person that they can talk to after coming back with military sexual trauma, the signature conditions and wounds of war and combat and battle and service. We spent trillions of dollars fighting these wars all over the world. And yet why do we spare any expense to take care of those veterans when they come back? Why do we ask them to wait days and weeks and months and years just to get the help that they need? Why not fully counting them into this democracy, making sure that they get everything that they've earned? Yes, that means primary and specialty and mental health care. That means a roof over their head if they're homeless right now. That means access to that earned post 9/11 GI Bill benefit so that they can continue with their education and make the most out of themselves now that they're back in this country. And if we really want to have their backs, really want to take the full inspiration from their service, we really want to honor those who are serving right now tonight in Afghanistan, where it is tonight. 17 years straight. Iraq, 27 years straight. I'm 46 years old right now, 3 kids of my own. I was 18 when George H.W. Bush first announced we were going to use U.S. military force, read U.S. service members' lives on the line in that country. And we have been there every year through 6 successive presidential administrations straight. But we're also, además, in Somalia, in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, in Niger, and so many other countries right now, asking those service members to potentially sacrifice their lives, to take the lives of others in this country's name. And my proposition is as follows. Before we start the next war, before we renew the wars that we are already in, let's ask ourselves these questions. What does victory look like? What is our strategy to achieve it? And why do we fight? Why do we ask you to put your life on the line? Why do we ask you to take someone else's life? If we are unwilling, unprepared to answer those questions, we must not only start another war, we must end the wars that we are in and bring those service members